All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for preparing for the post-purchase rush. Try saying that 10 times quickly. I am your host today. I'm Natalie Walkley, and I'm the VP of Marketing here at Optoro. And if you're not familiar with Optoro, we are a returns management software company working with brands and third-party logistics providers to tackle retail returns dilemma. I have the absolute pleasure today of sitting down with three amazing minds in retail and supply chain, and they are in the thick of holiday season. So thank you guys for joining us during this crazy time. Colleen, Amanda, Christine, to get started, let's just go around and let you guys introduce yourself, a little bit about your background and your organization, and then we'll jump right into the conversation today.
Thanks, Natalie. Hi, everyone. I'm Colleen Waters. I'm the VP of e-commerce here at Steve Madden, which includes, of course, Steve Madden, but also Dolce Vita, Betsy Johnson, and Blondo as well. Prior to joining the team here, I have past experiences at Victoria's Secret, Saks Hudson Bay, Lord & Taylor Group, and Bloomingdale's as well.
Fantastic.
Hi, my name is Amanda Yan. I'm the Director of Business Intelligence and Analytics at J.Crew Group. So I lead a centralized business intelligence team supporting all three brands under the J.Crew Group umbrella. That includes J.Crew, J.Crew Factory, and Madewell. I've been with J.Crew for a short time, but I bring experience from my previous roles at Box.com, an e-commerce grocery retailer, and Better.com, which is a tech-driven mortgage company. Earlier in my career, I worked in the insurance industry as a credentialed actuary.
Hey everyone, Christine Bradford with Returnalize. I'm the VP of Customer Success. Thank you to Optoro for another great partnership and a wonderful webinar. If you guys don't know Returnalize, we are the leading retail analytics software company for reducing returns. So we work with retailers such as J.Crew to help them understand what products are being returned and why. Also understanding in-depth customer behavior as it relates to purchase and returns. The most common one being bracketing, exchanges of the like. And then also understanding how supply chain manufacturing and operations may be impacting the returns landscape. We help retailers upstream so that we can provide recommended actions to help prevent returns from happening in the future. I've been with Returnalize for 4 years now and work with a multitude of different retailers and have a background in digital marketing, where I've also worked with a bunch of different retailers, but other verticals such as CPG, pharmaceuticals, technology, etc. So very happy to be here to talk about returns. I'm very passionate about the topic and also passionate about the holiday season. So very excited.
Love it. It's a great combo there. And we have such a powerhouse group with us. So before we dig into the questions, which I know everyone is dying to get into, just a reminder to all of our guests, we will save 10 to 15 minutes at the end for a live Q&A. So feel free throughout the webinar to submit any questions you have for Colleen or Amanda or even Christine. And we'll get through as many of those at the end as we can. And any questions we don't get to, we will follow up with an email. So be on the lookout for that after the webinar. So let's dig right in and talk customer experience. I know you'll hear customer experience is supreme in retail. And just to kind of set the stage a little bit, we just wrapped Black Friday, Cyber Monday. We're really still in the thick of holiday through the end of the year. A couple of things to note. NRF found that there were 197 million shoppers Thanksgiving week. That's the second highest number of shoppers that we've seen ever, second only last year. And of course, that's across both brick and mortar and e-com sales. There has been an interesting kind of trend. And if you look at the data, you would think that Cyber Monday is when we're going to see the most e-com orders, but we actually saw this year during Thanksgiving week, we saw more e-commerce orders on Black Friday than Cyber Monday. A little interesting tidbit there. And there's been a ton of talk about post-purchase, right? Which obviously includes returns. And NRF also just released their latest report with our friends at Happy Returns. they are expecting for 2024 an average return rate of 17%. And if you're like Christine and I, and you geek out about returns, you may know that that's actually a 2.5% increase from 2023. So it's really more in line with what we were seeing in 2020 and 2021 when there was that surge of e-com orders. Now that 17% that NRF is predicting is averaged across all verticals, but as Amanda and Colleen can probably attest, certain categories like apparel, footwear, accessories, consumer electronics, they can have up to 30 to 40% return rates. So pretty high numbers there. And then the dollar value is just totally astounding as well. They're predicting 890 billion in return merchandise this year. So again, kind of compare that year over year, that's up 147 billion. Like I can't even wrap my head around these numbers. I'm sure Amanda can because she's the data one, but the sheer volume and cost of returns is truly flabbergasting. So now that we've kind of set the stage of what we're looking at, a lot of people will refer to Black Friday, Cyber Monday as kind of the Super Bowl of retail, if you will. And there's so much prep and thought going into this. So how are you guys thinking about, and Amanda, I'll start with you from like a data perspective. How are you guys
Sure.
thinking about preparing for this and what are you putting in place and just what are you doing to get ready?
Sure. So it is my second time playing Team J. Crew at the Super Bowl, and it's truly exciting. So the BI team, business intelligence team, sits under tech at J. Crew. So by November, the whole tech team feels the intensity of this preparation, right? It's time when every detail matters and the pressure to deliver is palpable. A lot of people don't realize is that the surge in sales volume also means corresponding influx of transactional data flowing through our system. On top of that, we need to prepare our business partners monitoring key business metrics more closely and need more frequent data refresh. For example, instead of end-of-day projection every 4 hours, and our business partners needs end-of-day projection every single hour, starting 7 a.m., right? We have to ensure that our data architecture is robust enough to handle the increased load and that our BI tools are scaled to manage the heightened traffic. And with constant access of reliable data, our business partners can quickly make changes to the promotions and pricings, which puts additional pressure on the rest of the tech systems to support these updates. We also plan for unexpected, of course. That means creating detailed escalation plans to address potential data or system issues quickly and effectively. And J. Crew Tech, we maintain a 24-hour open call bridge during the time where we can join anytime to report, discuss, and escalate issues. So being consumers of our own products also works to our advantage. So our team members often report issues they encounter during their transactions and ensure they receive immediate attention and are resolved swiftly.
I love that. It's like a literal war room.
Yeah, for sure.
Colleen, what about you?
Yeah, I think Amanda nailed it with all of the cross-functional check-ins throughout the day, throughout the weekend, consistently. But I think 4 key things as we go into BFCM prep that are always top of mind. The first is how to get as many eyes on products as possible leading up to the big weekend so that we have a group of customers ready to go to retarget, convert them if they haven't already. So we're really looking at what are those traffic drivers in that ramp up period, not just during the event. And then how to offer enough variation to keep things interesting and fresh throughout the season. It seems like everybody starts talking about holiday, talking about Black Friday earlier and earlier. So making sure that it doesn't get stale by the time actual Black Friday comes around. And how to differentiate from others in the market as a part of that too. So for us, that includes ourselves at wholesalers. A lot of our shoppers who consider themselves loyalists to our brands don't consider where they buy. So in some ways, we're competing with ourselves. So how to differentiate versus chasing or trying to keep up with what everyone else is doing. And this doesn't have to mean offering deep discounts. It can mean getting the product right, having enough differentiation there. Maybe there's things they can only buy with us here. And then I think the fourth is making the end-to-end path to purchase as seamless as possible, inclusive of returns. So anticipating as many variations to that journey as possible and having the benefit of a multi-brand team, we can have team members kind of cross-shop each other's sites who aren't so close to it day to day. So hopefully we're getting ahead of any opportunities that we might find there.
Yeah, I love that because you're on, the e-com side, so you're focused on acquiring new customers and creating that customer experience. And it's like if you've seen the movie Spider-Man, you probably know the quote, like with great power comes great responsibility. You could almost say the same with holiday, right? With the great number of sales, which you want, the holiday sales, also comes that after effect of the great returns. And I was doing some research on this because I don't know if you guys have heard this before, but oftentimes people will consider January 2nd National Returns Day. So we have our own holiday now, I think thanks to our friends at UPS. But it really is describing, okay, people are back home from holiday. They've sorted through their gifts. They're figuring out what they want to keep and what they, want to ask for that gift receipt for or whatnot. So the digital teams are doing this heavy prep for holiday. And then what you see is it's your operational teams and your store associates that are kind of handling the influx come January. So how are you guys preparing your teams for this high volume, not just during, holiday increased sales, but for the peak of those returns that are coming back and making sure that there's a smooth customer experience there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing that everybody at this point really does is the extended return windows. So for us, it's anyone who buys November 1st onwards has through the end of January. So maybe when it's typically a 30-day window, it could be up to a 90-day for those really early shoppers. So giving them that window to make those returns, especially if they're buying early and it's a gift. And then, if it's a first time shopper, if it is someone buying a gift for somebody or something like that, it could make or break them shopping with you again. So you don't want to make things too difficult. And I think bringing as much convenience to the customer as possible. Some of our brands have store locations, some don't. So it's a mixed bag there. Obviously, people can bring them to the stores for the brands that have it. But I think having options for, instant refunds, express returns, at-home pickups, we're testing things together this season where you can have an Uber courier come pick up your return and take it to FedEx for you. And then I think that exchange piece, especially if it's someone trying your brand for the first time and maybe not understanding the sizing, is key. Because again, if you can get that customer back after the BFCM rush, you've really locked them in, and you only have a chance of that happening if you leave them with a great first impression.
Absolutely. Amanda, what about on y'all's side?
Yeah, so echo what Colleen said. We also have extended return window from original 30 days to until January 9th if you start shopping by November 1st. And also on the digital side, right, we have a user-friendly return portal that allows customers to initially return quickly, track their progress. And also and on the customer care side, well, the approach really started before the holiday season, during the holiday season, but it definitely will extend into the post-holiday return season, is that we scaled up the supporting resources and actively monitor and communicate trends we see throughout the day on a daily basis with associates who support that. And additionally, we extend services availability by offering overnight hours of email and chat support. And also on the other side, the reverse supply chain returning team, they will partner with UPS to ensure they have needed capacity to make sure the return pipeline delivery have all the packages on a daily basis, and all the supplies are present and on site at all our third-party logistic partners and prior going into the holiday seasons, right? And to avoid like supply shortage, competing with other companies for vendor production. We also, ramp up the scheduled delivery, scheduled and pickup from our from a trucking perspective. So all of these initiatives are based on a forecasting of the return using prior year's return data.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like a giant puzzle here.
Natalie, I was going to add a couple things here because I think the
Yeah.
team talked a lot in terms of, preparedness and operational things they can be doing on the back end. But I think some other things that we're able to do and support when we work with retailers is that monitoring that Amanda was talking about. So certainly keeping a pulse on real time what is happening. So not necessarily waiting for that January 2nd date, but the sales are starting way before the Black Friday week these days, and understanding pretty early on in the season if you launched a specific product for the holidays, maybe it's not doing so great and it's already getting returned. Is there something you could be doing on the e-commerce side to prevent that return from even expanding further or continuing to be a high returner by perhaps providing better guidance on size and fit, better imagery, directions, things like that. So certainly I think operational prep is important, but also the monitoring that happens can also help you get ahead of it so that you're not dealing with an influx at the end of the season.
Yeah, that's super insightful. And I want to come back because I've got another question for you, Christine. But I wanted to comment on something that Colleen said is, when we talk about the returns experience, what we hear most often is that if shoppers are having a negative experience, the likelihood that they don't come back is sky high. I mean, I've seen it up to like 90 something percent. And we also know that there's data out there that says shoppers will sometimes not even initially shop with a retailer if they don't have a good return policy. So we hear that a lot in terms of like customer acquisition and loyalty, but there's a latent cost too that I think more and more retailers are uncovering here, and that's in terms of the capital expense of that inventory. So just a few weeks ago, Optora released our 2024 Returns Unwrapped survey, which we'll give everyone access to at the end of the webinar. But we polled both shoppers and retailers and kind of compared their viewpoints. And what we found is that 54% of retailers are looking for ways to improve the recovery on those items coming back, but they often don't really know how to do that, right? So get it back, but what's the item I got? Is it even worth shipping back if it's a $15 lipstick and I'm going to pay $8 in shipping? Do I tell the customer, just keep it, give them a little extra delight, and to Colleen's point, increase the likelihood that they're going to come back and shop with you again? Then when you get that item back, is it the item they said it was? What's the condition of the item? And then how do I make sure I'm getting as much margin on that item, especially with extended return windows when things are quickly approaching out of season potentially if they've had it for longer. So it's definitely retailers are thinking about returns through the CX lens, but I think the savvy retailers are now thinking about returns through that profitability lens too. So Christine, something you said is, you're looking at returns across all of y'all's brands and getting those nuggets of like, hey, this product's not performing. Maybe we pull back or let's update something on the storefront here. But what are some creative ways that you've seen your customers kind of flip the script on returns from something that's historically like a cost center, chalk it up to that versus something that can drive loyalty and revenue for an organization?
Yeah, for sure. I love this question because I geek out about returns, and customer behavior is a lot of fun to kind of follow and understand. I think, it using returns is so powerful because you can understand what's performing well and what isn't. And I think historically retailers have always looked at gross sales, right? And not taking into account returns or using returns to build back that loyalty. So Colleen actually hit it right the nail on the head with first time experience. It costs so much money to acquire a new customer. So if they get, an experience of they receive the wrong item, it's the holiday season, they receive the wrong item, or I know last year I ordered something and it came late and I wasn't able to package it up and give it as a gift. That leaves a lasting impression, right? So what are you going to do about it? Are you going to follow up and say, oops, we made a mistake. We're so sorry you had a bad experience. Let us course correct it for you. We've certainly helped retailers do that. I think, we've had this conversation with J. Crew as well when there are logistical things that just go wrong in the process for a first-time buyer with them, and how do you improve that to guarantee that they come back? The other more interesting and fun things you can do is certainly use those better performing products, right? So J. Crew really likes to be very personalized in their intentions when they retarget, when they send email marketing. And I think it's important to highlight those better performing products, or to Colleen's point, a variety of products. So using products that have lower return rates, so now the inverse, right? And high customer engagement, meaning once a customer is engaged with that product, they loved it so much, they're guaranteed to come back and shop with your brand. For using that score, you're able to then promote those products to then target her with a follow-up campaign to get her to come back and increase her LTV with you. You can use those products in your programs to go ahead and acquire customers. So it's just about being more savvy, and certainly using a little bit of the inverse, right? So using the better performing products and pulling back on those high returning items, or using the poor experience to go ahead and acknowledge it, and then make sure that you're capturing that so that people are more likely to come back in the future.
Yeah, and everyone's always watching Amazon and what Amazon does, right? And y'all have probably noticed Amazon now says this is a highly returned item if you're shopping. And it has influenced my purchasing behaviors in the past of like, oh, maybe it's the quality or whatever, and I go and read the reviews. So it's interesting to see how retailers are now thinking about both sales and returns. So let's pivot a little bit to returns, fraud, and abuse. This has been a hot topic this year. We saw a lot of this behavior kind of soar in 2020, but it is up 300% in the last 3 to 4 years. And there's definitely some bad actors in retail returns, and then there's innocuous behavior where people are maybe, just buying with an intent to return. They don't know their size. Colleen, you mentioned this. I don't know my size. I'm going to get a couple and send back, the ones that don't work, or they're prepping for an event and they kind of want to see it with the outfit or whatnot. But either way, they're costly and they're problematic for retailers, and retailers are concerned about them. So how are you guys identifying fraud or even abusive behaviors? And then what are y'all seeing most commonly with your brands?
Yeah, I think thinking back through all my past lives, on the retail fashion side, there's top of mind those kind of quote unquote rental shoppers that maybe are shopping for a special occasion with the intent of wearing it and returning it, to your point. This made way for that lovely, this tag must be attached to return. Very visible tags that you might see
Giant tag.
on location dresses now. So that's a big one. Natalie, you mentioned, the sizing piece. Maybe they're buying multiple sizes and things out the gate, knowing that some of that's going to get returned. Lots of solutions in that space now. There's try before you buy offerings. There's solutions like TrueFit. When that can also help when you're entering a new category of business too, right? Where maybe you see increased return rates if customers can't physically try these new categories on in person. They can kind of use brands that they do know their sizing in to help determine what that looks like there. And then there's those who chronically claim missing packages. And I think for that one, using your partners' networks for this one, there's a lot of people playing in that space that can see not just within your brand, but across brands that this customer might shop. Is this an identifiable pattern? And there's vendors that will fully handle these claims for you now, like the Extends of the world, as well as a lot of return vendors offering recommendation services if they see that history. So I think that's a big one. And then I think the other one, which you also mentioned, is people not sending back the product when they return. I've seen customers send back boxes of rocks before when they unpack them in the warehouse. So I think those are the big ones that we see the most often.
I think what Colleen said at the beginning were the event apparels and accessories probably heightened around this time because of the Christmas parties and New Year parties. And I mean, I've seen companies handle this kind of differently. At David's Bridal, I believe they have very short returning period for their like dresses. So I think that may be something we can do. Like certain pieces, certain products, maybe may need to have shorter returning period just because they are culprit for frequent offender of those holidays shopping. Another thing is a lot of activities fall into this gray area, right? It's like certain activity that contribute to the revenue loss, and also increase the operational costs, like return and repurchase items at a lower price. And Returnalize helped us identify some of the incidents, and also like returning accessories. And so they just increase during holiday season. And to address these challenges, I think it's how do we mitigating the associated revenue loss and operational costs, right? And many things that can be done, like for example, offer price adjustment during a certain specific time frame. It doesn't reduce revenue loss, but it does reduce the operational costs of restocking and put it back to circulation. And maybe implement final sale prices for holiday and seasonal items, introducing shorter returning period, like I said earlier, maybe also applying restocking fees for maybe probably not applicable to J.Crew, but like electronic products. We've seen that Best Buy and Target, Walmart, they have done that with electronic items.
Mhm.
Yeah, and have you guys seen those big ugly tags that everyone now is putting on their occasion wear? I was shopping for an occasion dress and I was buying and returning, buying and returning. Some of those tags were like wrapped around the whole dress. So retailers are starting to get very creative to make sure that there isn't this renting or wardrobing. The other thing I want to call out, which we have seen in the data, this buying multiples to figure out your size is actually pretty profitable for a retailer, because she ultimately ends up keeping something. Where it starts to get interesting is continuing to monitor that behavior. So if you have a customer that is chronically doing this, or, we understand that your best shoppers and your number one shoppers are always going to be your highest returners. But if you have those segments of non-profitable customers or customers who just bracket constantly with you, that's when you want to start taking a look at those types of customers, as Amanda noted, that we've helped identify. So we pick up on those patterns that are more abnormal, that are unprofitable for the retailer. So then the retailer can go make a decision. I haven't had anyone fire customers yet, but there's conversations of maybe you don't give them their money back. Maybe they end up getting store credit moving forward with you instead. And that sort of thing, where certainly it starts to limit, or we've had a retailer delay the refund until the package is processed. So if we've identified that this type of customer is chronically sending things back, there are missing items in the box, there's rocks in the box, certainly you can then say, okay, when that scan happens to return the item, you're not going to refund then, you're going to refund once you've processed the packaging at the warehouse and you know that it's a true return and they can get their money back. So we've certainly been able to help retailers see these behaviors so then they can go ahead and take the appropriate action to course correct.
Yeah, and I mean, you guys have y'all are experiencing what all the data is saying as well. Like in our latest research, it said 73% of retailers are most worried about wardrobe and bracketing in terms of fraud and abuse. But here's what's crazy. Shoppers are wardrobing significantly more. 69% of shoppers admit to wardrobing, and that's a 38% increase from last year. That was pretty sobering to read. Now, when we asked why, the why behind it, most of them did cite financial reasons. So I think having that data and being able to segment and understand abusive behaviors versus, like I'm a frequent returner, but I'm also a frequent buyer from a lot of the brands that I love. So
I think
go ahead, Amanda.
I was just gonna say, from consumers' perspective, I think personally, I would more likely to purchase from a company that has a solid return policy and allow me some of the wardrobing perspective, especially when it comes to holiday season dresses. right? It's difficult to find the exact right size the first time and pants and how what maybe I'm jumping ahead here a little bit. And I think the trend is that we have done a great job customize marketing strategy, but it seems like we'll also need to do better and customize return strategy based on the audience. Yeah.
I love it. That's a perfect segue because, obviously you've got this data, you've got these behaviors, and then you have to craft your return policy. And we've seen a huge shift in return policies over the last couple of years. People weren't charging, now they're charging. So how have y'all's, and specifically Amanda and Colleen, how have y'all's policies evolved over the last few years as these behaviors have kind of become more prevalent or just, the general surge in e-com has changed?
Yeah, I think Christine and Amanda both touched on it, but the big trend I'm hearing more and more about is that customized return policy based on the customer's behaviors, which I think is really interesting, but I think difficult to manage from a service perspective, especially if you have people returning online and sending back to the warehouse, but also in stores. And how do you get customer service reps in store? Support where they recognize those differences, and what do you kind of put out there to the world as your policy versus what might get individualized down the road. So I think it's a tough balance to manage, and I don't know if people have really figured it out yet, but I think it's a really cool idea. We're personalizing everything else, so why not, especially when we think about profitability opportunities. So I'm interested to see kind of how that continues on.
Yeah. I agree with Colleen here. It's a challenge that we don't really have a good solution for. And I think we play with different policies. Hey, include return, charging for return, not charging for return, and weigh the pro and cons. It's just we haven't reached a place where say, okay, this is definitely the right decision moving forward. And also imagine different brands face different challenges because of the clientele, like the demographic they're facing, and it's a big challenge. I'm looking forward to how return policy and return analytics can continue maturing to help us have better understanding and come up with a more informed strategy.
Yeah, I mean, Colleen, you're spot on in that, everything else is personalized. Like your airline experience is personalized. Why wouldn't returns be as well? And we often will use kind of the phrase to fee or not to fee at Optoro, but it's like such interesting dynamic. And I still think the outcome is to be determined because now 63% of retailers are charging in some form for returns, whether that's shipping or restocking or whatnot. The ones that aren't charging, over half of them are considering charging. So it's definitely there. But shoppers loathe paying for returns. Like it's very clear in the data. They hate it. They think it's the most frustrating thing. And they will not shop with retailers because they charge. So there's this friction that we're creating there. And in our latest research, we found that 75% of shoppers will embellish or exaggerate. We didn't use the word lie, but can read between the lines. They'll embellish that return reason in order to avoid a fee. So mismarking something as damaged or mismarking it as it didn't look like what the website said it did. So that's an interesting dynamic that I think we're going to have to kind of figure out how to solve. But the future is personalization, and that's one of the things that Optoro helps with our customers is let's segment your audience and understand who they are and give them a unique journey. And always have one free option, and maybe you pick which option that is, and et cetera, et cetera.
Loyalty perk too, right? Like if you're a retailer that has a loyalty program, putting free returns in as one of those perks feels like a no-brainer.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Madewell does that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
Yes. I will sign up. I will sign up for free shipping. I will sign up for free return.
Totally. It's worth it.
Yeah,
that
the larger retailers, the larger e-commerce company, Amazon, they're doing such a fantastic job with return, right? And that's set expectation, set the bar really high. in the customer's expectation, and you can drop the package without having to wrap it at a local store. And same day, as soon as the local store receive the package, you get refund back to your Amazon account or your credit card. That is sets the bar really high, and that's what the rest of retailers have to compete against.
Yeah, absolutely. So one more question on policies, and then I want to kind of shift to like future looking stuff. But when it comes to data, and Christine and Amanda, this is probably in y'all's wheelhouse, but when y'all are looking at historic data or, live monitoring and then updating policies based on that, what is the data you're looking at? And then how are you like tweaking policy kind of based on that data?
Yeah, I can take that to start. Obviously we're going to start by looking at the return time. How long is it taking customers to return? So despite having a policy in place, there might be customers that are obviously going above and beyond that. The data actually shows that the majority of customers tend to return items within 30 days, even for retailers that have an extended policy. However, there are these circumstances where if you are seeing too much of that behavior, then we advise the retailer to definitely pull back the policy. So a lot of our retailers have adjusted their policy. So if they've been generous in the past and allowed 60, 90 days, they're pulling back and they're going to 30. I've got a retailer that wants to do 90 because they say that builds customer loyalty. They want their customers to try the product. But they also had this undisclosed, you had up to a year to return. And so it was creating this like trickle effect of clients or customers returning past the 90 days. And these are products that are now damaged out because of wear and use. So definitely we decided that we're going to get rid of that. So no more up to a year at least. Let's keep the 90-day because that's a crucial piece of their customer loyalty. But in the end, 80 something, 90% of customers are returning within the 30 days. So it kind of works out. And then you want to monitor return rates. On top of it, after you've changed your policy, and then also monitor loyalty after you've made changes to your policy. I also think, the types of products you're selling also play a role in here. So we have a retailer that specializes just in occasion wear. So when their customer shows up, they're looking for a mother of the bride, a bridesmaid dress. We actually found that those customers, because they're looking for something specific, they're shopping for something specific, they are not as sensitive to the return fees. And this retailer has actually added return fees by piece. You return one item, it's this price. You return two items, it's this price. And when you look at the analysis and the data post to say, how did this impact loyalty and repeat buyers? It did not, because she is looking for something so specific and she wants to be shopping with this brand. And so she is willing to go ahead and pay those fees. So I think it's also, as we talk about personalization and customization, it's important to also know what products you may want to offer certain policies on, just because occasion wear can be a little bit different than an everyday item.
That's fascinating. Amanda, any other data that you would add to that?
I think Christine covered most of them. Like return rate is definitely something we look closely at. It's not just around the holiday season, right? And return rate is something to be evaluated throughout time. And return processing time, and also I think you mentioned this, Natalie, at the very beginning. Until very recently, retailers most focused on gross sales, and now return is what's the impact of return on the net margin, on the net sales, on the profitability at the end of the day. That's important. If the longer the returning the period also means that to see the effect of the net and the net effect of the return, it's going to be delayed. We may think we're very profitable, and then at the end, after everything is returned, canceled, it turned out to be not as profitable as we anticipate to be. So all these need to be taken into consideration when we talk about like returning policies.
Absolutely. So let's look future state here, and then we'll go into Q&A and open it up to the audience. But you know, we've hit on this in many ways, but shoppers like are calling the shots and their expectations kind of set the pace that the retailer has to respond to. In a perfect world, the retailer is moving at the speed of expectations or even ahead of it, right? But how do you anticipate, or what are any predictions around shoppers' expectations with returns changing? And then the side effect of that is, what are you guys as an organization doing to kind of prepare for that? So imagine you'd gotten this question a couple years ago and you were offering free returns and now you're charging. Like, what do you think is going to happen with returns in your clientele?
I think the big thing, and Amanda really hit on it already, is the speed. We've already seen that expectation with shipping expectations and Prime and getting things in, 1 to 2 days, same day in some cases. So I think customers aren't going to want to wait a few weeks for returns if they're waiting for the warehouse to receive it, verify it, get your return back, or do all of that processing before they'll send the return or the exchange item to you if you're exchanging. And, Natalie, you mentioned, as we talked about wardrobing, finances being a big piece of that. So if it's going to take 2 to 3 weeks after they send their return in to get that money back, that's a disservice to them. So I think that's where we'll see the biggest shifts.
Yeah, we are impatient as shoppers, aren't we?
Yes.
Guilty.
Yeah, you definitely speed is top of the top of the we see, and the convenience, right? The seamless hassle-free returns through multiple channels, buy it in store, in return online, or drop off at the partner locations. And maybe the third thing is sustainability, right? Now our customers have become more environmentally conscious and seeking return policy that just minimize risk and the carbon footprint. It's great to can return an item to a place where you don't have to package it and bubble wrap it, package it, find another box to ship it back, and that's just going to go to waste. And also the cost associated with the operational cost, right? And is it possible exploring option like returnless refunds, low cost items? I think one of you hit that, and also to see one item. At J.Crew, we did a analysis on following one item just to see how many times it goes through the cycle, being sold, return. It's the value diminished, added operational costs. At the end, the cost of putting this back into the cycle is a lot higher than what would get at the end. And that's all the trends that there are a few trends we see. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so last question I'd love for everybody to answer, but there's the old adage, you can't fix what you don't measure. And we've talked a little bit about kind of data and numbers and whatnot, but if you think about holiday season, what metrics are you guys looking at that helps you gauge your overall success of your kind of post-holiday return strategy?
Yeah, I think touching on what I mentioned earlier and making that great first impression, or they won't come shop with you if they do have a poor experience. We've talked a lot about individual product return rates, but I think the big thing here to measure is the customer return rate. So coming out of all of this BFCM and holiday madness, if we can get that customer back in Q1 in spring to shop with us again, then that's a really big win.
So when you say return rate, you're referencing like repurchase rate.
Yeah,
Okay, got it. Like loyalty.
exactly.
I love that. What about you, Amanda?
And another thing we look at is return rate by category and by item, right? The highest return item, and from the merchant and planner perspective, what we can do differently next season and next holiday, or even post-holiday, to refine our planning strategy and change of the merchandise to reduce that. And another thing is I mentioned a little bit earlier, it's impact on finance impact, right? What's the impact on net sales and EBITDA at the end of the day, and how can we really how can we maximize that with return and consideration?
Fantastic. Christine, I'm sure you have lots of thoughts on this topic.
Lots of thoughts. Well, I'll actually create it full circle because we look at all of it. So what we'll do is we'll provide a snapshot to understand how did the retailer do year over year, right? Where are you this year versus the previous year? Did sales go up? As a result of that, did your return rate change? And what is the mix of that change? So sometimes people just think, oh, my sales went up, so naturally my return rate's going to go up. Yes, that's a possibility, and that's probably a portion of it. But then also, as Amanda mentioned, if you break it down then and look at returns by department and specific product classes, you might understand that, well, even so that your sales went up, there were certain departments that perhaps did worse this year. Maybe you had a specific assortment that just didn't do well. And why didn't it do well? So that you can understand for planning and buying purposes for the following season how to go ahead and course correct that. Then we also look at the customer behavior side of things to understand how many customers did you acquire? How did they perform? Did their returns, typically first-time buyers tend to have a higher return rate than repeat customers. What did that look like? And then for your repeat buyers, what was their behavior? And then again, following up later, to Colleen's point, to understand, were you able to keep those first-time buyers and the loyalty up? And then also segmenting out any customers that perhaps had a bad experience, or perhaps there was a segment of customers that just experienced latency or issues with operations, highlighting those so that the retailer can then follow up and understand. Something I didn't mention that would also be a part of that is on the supply chain side. So again, looking at the supplier performance and understanding, was there a high rate of damage or defective items that can be addressed post-season in preparation for the next year or following season? Maybe you launched a new product that also had a new manufacturer tied to it. So looking at all of those, and then the metrics obviously span from looking at sales to return rates to volume to repurchase rates, etc.
Love it. Okay, well, let's go ahead and open it up to Q&A, and I see some really good ones in here, so I'm excited. This first one is going to be maybe create some friction. But let's see if I can do this correctly. So the question is, who is the best function, or what is the best department, I'll paraphrase, on the brand or retailer side to effectively manage returns?
I would say supply chain and logistics for mainly the downstream productivity piece of it, of once we get the return, what do we do with that inventory to still get the most out of it? Whether that's putting it back in our inventory and it's resellable again, if it is maybe in that transitional season piece, do we want it to go to like outlet or another third-party retail partner? Maybe, we have peer-to-peer resale offerings across our brands. Maybe it gets a second life in something like that if it is, looking worn or scuffed or things like that, and we can't sell it as new. So I think that optimization piece is the biggest piece of the puzzle to be successful.
Yeah. I'm coming from a different angle. I think the fraudulent activities aside, right? One of the biggest reason return is the expectation, right? Size expectation, color expectation, fit expectation. How do we help the customer have accurate understanding of the product, and so they don't have the expectation when they receive the product, there is a match of expectation. So maybe that's the I think what have influenced there is the e-commerce, the product description. And now when we're talking about AI technology, right? How can we have a virtual fitting, and have a AI generated description of the product, and even in the future, can we load the image of ourselves in there and have the product fit on us, take a look at it? I think a lot of retailers are looking into this. I think from that may be the most effective way to reduce the return from expectation perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with Amanda. I think it's everyone's responsibility within an organization. So, unfortunately, not retailers haven't really assigned a returns person. There are some out there, like a
Mm-hmm.
post-purchase department, or obviously the operational side is very clear, but I think it touches everybody within the organization, starting with the e-commerce team and the the upstream, all the way over to marketing and supply chain and operations. So we try to work with as many departments as possible, because if everyone's doing a little bit at a time and taking action and hitting things up upstream and downstream, eventually overall you should see that return rate reduced by about 15 to 20%.
Yeah, we have a retailer that I think was on our last webinar with us, Christine, who said that they launched a returns action team and they use the acronym RAT, which we just thought was hysterical.
Oh yes, that was Crystal.
Yeah, and so we talk about that because interestingly enough, and maybe someone mentioned this and I missed it, but we're seeing a lot of finance teams that are leading the charge on returns because it's just crushing margin. So, and yet the latest research I think from Gartner says that 97% of retailers don't have a dedicated owner for return. So like people are realizing, oh, this is a huge problem and it's too expensive to ignore, too costly to ignore, but everyone's still kind of figuring out like how do we work together cross-functionally to solve that. So it's the same kind of dilemma in the OMS world. It's like everyone's kind of, doesn't want to take the burden of returns. Okay, let's go back to the list. We've got some good questions here. So this would be for the retailers. So how are your teams taking a more qualitative lens on returns and focusing on fit consistency and communication with the customer? It's almost like preventing the return.
Yeah, I think that's a big one across the information we get on returns and then also reviews as well. And being as proactive as we can there, whether it's showing, that scale of run small, runs big, runs true to size, to kind of self-help. But we definitely, if we're seeing common themes around something around fit, we we'll go back to the factories in many cases, or we'll request some samples so that we can dig into it more for sure. But then also adding like a fit tip to the product page and helping the customer up front know, if you're in between sizes, go down the half size, up the half size, whatever it might be.
That's
Yeah, the
great.
product description on the website is definitely very helpful. And then and Christine Returnalize and have been helping us to go through on bi-weekly basis, right? Going through the highest return items to understand proactively why they're returned. Is a size issue, is a fit issue. Then the merchants can take the feedback and adjust, and also work with the sourcing suppliers. Like Christine, as you mentioned earlier, is it specific with the supplier, particular supplier that had an issue with the size, or sometimes because it's because the supply is only working on this one product. It's not really a supplier issue. It's really the design issue. So it just proactively identify and peel the onions back to understand the true cause of the sizing, and it's in the long run, it will help with the reduction of the returns.
Yeah.
It's a great one to lean into store teams on too, and talking to the sales associates who are there with the customers, and are they finding on that particular style, customers are starting with one size and then having to adjust and buy differently, and getting that feedback.
Absolutely. And I think there are multiple data points you can look at too to really understand what's happening. So not just looking at return reasons, but understanding that bracketing behavior is so insightful, because if she is picking between two sizes and most folks are saying it runs small and the bracketing behavior supports that, exchange behavior supports that. Colleen, you hit the nail on the head looking at the review data. So looking at all of that can really provide insight into what's going on. And then to Amanda's point, you're peeling back the onion. So then you're farming out, the different findings to the different departments to be able to get ahead of it and course correct.
Love it. Okay, this one, I will submit, it says, is 20% return rate on open box products high or normal? So to context set, and then I'll open it up. The NRF is predicting that the average return rate across all verticals for 2024 is about 17%. So now say that, and then I'll open it up. Maybe Christine, you can take this
Yep.
one.
I'll take this one. So it's kind of, I would actually argue, so that's an average, but that's not what I would use. It's highly dependent on the product. Also, you know, I will tell you dresses and denim have higher return rates than that. And then as you get into occasion wear, you can see return rates up to 80%. So it definitely depends on your vertical, what products you're selling. And so I can't really say that 20% is good or not. It really is looking at and establishing a baseline based on the category of items that you're selling. The market also plays a role. If you're a global retailer, Germany's going to return at a much higher rate. The UK is going to return at another higher rate than the US. And so we always try to establish a baseline that looks at market channel, because online returns are going to also return at a higher rate than store, department, and those are kind of the three qualifiers that would actually establish a baseline for you to understand if something is a good return rate or not, and that's how we quantify high returners.
Perfect. I love that. So we've got just 3 or 4 minutes here, and we've got like 6 or 7 questions still in the queue. Let me see if we can get to one more. Has there been any research on ways to curb abusive behavior for gift with purchases, PWPs, step-ups, etc.? I'm not sure I'm tracking with the last part of that question, but I think it's abusive behavior when it's like purchased as a gift. Any thoughts on that one?
You place your order to get the gift with purchase item and then maybe return the original item, I think is.
Got it. That's what that is. So any thoughts on that from anyone?
I know that during the
Everyone figured it out.
yeah, I yeah. The store just have a relaxed return policy. Definitely open some room for that, but it's also the time to engage in the customer loyalty and customer comeback. So it's really a hard problem to tackle. I know at J. Crew during this season, right, we will, even if you don't have the receipt, they will return. If it's a J. Crew product, they will return with a store credit just for the customer loyalty perspective. And that does, we do stop that after the season is over. It's a tough battle to fight. And identify the fraud there is also challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Liz asked, how can we get stats on average return rates by category? I'd love to get more detailed information on specific women's apparel categories. I know I'll answer this and then Christine, I'll let you fill in if you know anything else, but I know Statista puts out return rates by category down to like apparel, footwear, electronics, home goods, that level. I don't know if they break it up by like gender, men's, women, or like children's or whatnot. Christine, do you have any additional insight into that?
I don't actually. We have our own benchmarking, but I obviously can't share that out. But as far as what's out in the market, yeah, not as familiar with it.
Yeah, so Liz, I would look up Statista return rates by category, and you can kind of see like the averages. I think for apparel in general, it's like between 30 and 40%, and apparel does include footwear. Great question. I like the way everyone is thinking about this. Okay, let's see if we get one more, and then we'll wrap up here. Okay, are there any products or services that help scan return boxes to make sure they haven't been opened, or potentially if the item was removed or swapped? Great question. I would love to take this one if you guys don't mind. So yes, when we're talking returns, one of the most important pieces of it is that actual processing of the return. You most likely need dedicated technology to do that. and by technology, specifically software. So like at Aptoro, we are a returns management system, and our bread and butter is that dispositioning of returned inventory. So what is the item? Does it match the description? Does it still have tags on it? You're doing that confirmation of the item and then the conditioning of the item and systematically figuring out what should I do with this return? Whether that's put it back on the shelf, sell it full price. If it's a bathing suit in New York in November, maybe I ship it to LA or to Florida to increase the likelihood that it's going to sell. So all of that information can be systematized through software, improve your margins and recovery significantly. And then I know that a lot of companies, ourselves included, are looking at, visual scanning, using AI to process stuff faster. So there's a lot out there. I love that question, and we'll keep that question in our email follow-up as well. So wow, that's the most questions I've ever had on a webinar. Well done, audience. Let's give a little round of applause for your questions. But I think that's a wrap for today's conversation around preparing for the post-purchase rush. Colleen, Amanda, Christine, thank you guys so much for joining and sharing your insights and your experiences. We really appreciate it so much.
It's an honor
Thank-
being here. Thank you for
Yeah.
inviting us.
Thank you. Take care.
And for anyone who is still on and wanting to uncover the latest research around returns, you can download our 2024 Returns Unwrapped report. There's a QR code you can scan. There's lots of great insight into what your shoppers are thinking and what retailers are feeling, and kind of comparing those perspectives and how you can create a winning return strategy for 2025. So thank you so much for your time today, and we'll see you next time.